Hello, Kieran.
Kairyn, yeah.
Kyron, sorry.
All
Kyron.
good. All good. Sorry, there was like a bit of a registration to get in. I had to like answer a bunch of questions.
Oh. All right. Go ahead, Fearence.
Awesome. Okay. Hello everyone, and welcome to the fourth session of Candu's Youth Connect for the year of 2025. I'd like to first introduce myself. My name is Fearence Francis, or my Plains Cree name is Pasqua Mostus Kawichi Mitawe Mat Tsiga-san, and I'm excited to be your host today. A little more about me is that I'm a proud member of the Pipot First Nation located in southern Saskatchewan. I'm currently enrolled into the First Nations University of Canada and am currently serving as the National Student Director for Candu. Whether you're joining us for the first time or you're a returning participant, we're grateful to have you here. A little more about Canada's Youth Connect is that it is a platform to empower Indigenous youth aged 18 to 35 and allies across Turtle Island to participate virtually to discuss topics such as economic development, lands management, and entrepreneurship. Some past topics that were covered in the most recent Youth Connects were technology and innovation trends shaping economic development with Masakwin James Harper, and our most recent session was economic development projects with First Nation communities, which featured Nicholas Labucan. Before we dive in, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the incredible support from the Starbucks Foundation. Without their partnership, this series wouldn't be possible, so a big thank you to them. Also, before we begin, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. If you'd like to speak, please use the raise hand function. Also, make sure to grab some water and a notepad in case you want to take notes. And stick around to the end because we'll be doing a $100 gift card draw for those who complete the evaluation. Your feedback will be crucial in shaping future Youth Connect sessions. Now, let's get to the highlight of today's session. Our guest speaker, Kieran, I believe that
Kairyn.
Kairyn, sorry. Kairyn Potts. I'll go over a quick introduction on Kairyn and he'll take it from there. Kairyn Potts, him, is proudly Nakota Sioux from Treaty 6 territory. He is a proud two-spirit person and Indigenous content creator. As a former board member for Two Spirits in Motion and Youth Suicide Prevention Team representative, he is a passionate advocate who works to improve Indigenous youth lives, particularly queer youth and youth in the child and family services system. He was named to TikTok's Global Discover list in 2022 as one of the platform's top 50 changemakers. Kairyn now makes his home in beautiful Toronto, where he works as a writer, actor, model, and TV host. He continues his youth advocacy through public speaking, content creation, frontline workshops, and community events. He is the host of Canada's first original series, Reclaimed, and has appeared in the APTN series 7th Gen. Kai co-founded the Indigenous gaming organization Nichi Clan in 2022. Kai is an avid gamer and streamer on Twitch and TikTok who aims to create representation and opportunities for Indigenous youth in the gaming and content creation world. His creative projects allow him to utilize online platforms to share his voice, culture, makeup, lifestyle, and fashion. His audience is highly engaged and shares his passions for humor and gaming, but also Indigenous social issues. Please give me a warm welcome to Kairyn Potts. The floor is now yours.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you so much, Fearence, for that. Damn, that was a long bio, hey? Holy. Real too long. I probably wrote it too, which is the shitty thing. Oh, am I allowed to swear? Sorry, guys. But anyway, Miigwech, thank you so much. Hi, Ishnish. Yeah, like Fearence said, hello everybody. Abawashteno, Kairyn Potts Gebchat, Alexis Nakota Sioux Nation, Chadehach and Mochat. My name is Kairyn Potts, and I come to you humbly from Treaty 6 territory. I'm registered in Paul First Nation, but I'm actually, I like to say that I'm from Alexis because that's where my mom and my grandmother are from. And yeah, I grew up speaking both Ifgabi or Stony, but I also speak Cree because I grew up in Cree ceremony and just with a lot of amazing Cree people in Muskegowuk First Nation. But yeah, like I said, I'm currently living in beautiful Takaranto. However, currently, right now, I'm coming to you guys live from Chicago, Illinois, which is kind of random. I know. I don't even know why I'm here. I was at Coachella for the last, like, I want to say 4 days, and I was gonna show you guys my sunburn, but it's really wicked, you guys. Um, I'm here in Chicago filming a documentary about Two-Spirit identity and queerness with NBC National News, which is super, super exciting. But I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so glad that I was brought in to talk a little bit about creating space for Indigenous creators, as well as talk a little bit about my journey and my career and sort of what I get up to and how I kind of got to where I am in this crazy lifestyle, because it really is crazy. And when I grew up, I didn't think that I would be on a stage talking to people, or making videos on the internet, or being crazy on the internet. I grew up thinking I would probably, I don't know, be working in retail or something like that, it really wasn't until I was well into my adulthood that I started to understand how important artistry and creativity really are. And as Indigenous people, we have sort of always been at the forefront of generating art and technology and adapting and creating our own worlds and storytelling through art. So, like I said, I come to you from a Miskituaskaihikan from Edmonton, and I was the youngest of three boys. My mom, she had all of us, and she was a single mom. However, my mom was really somebody who wasn't the greatest, I think, at choosing partners, and struggled a lot with substance abuse and with alcoholism. And as a result, she was bringing a lot of dangerous men into my life and into my brother's lives. And so we grew up with a lot of violence and a lot of drugs and alcohol. And I think that that story is quite common, unfortunately, for a lot of our young people. They grow up in situations where they're exposed to traumas like that. And as I got older, I was luckily, I had a lot of great mentors and a lot of people in my life that were helping keep me on a good path, especially with schooling. I think schooling was my saving grace. I really excelled in academics, and I was somebody who really valued education because of my mom. And luckily, I graduated high school and I went to university. I studied social work and psychology, and I ended up going into the workforce in my 20s as somebody who was working in policy and working with disability and inclusion, and really a lot of just boring desk jobs, honestly. Things that weren't really fulfilling for me. I always kind of felt this draw, this pull, this calling to help my own people and to help people in my community get out of situations that they didn't want to be in. But I wasn't doing that while I was working in uh, government and municipal, but also provincial government. It just felt like I was pushing a lot of papers and answering a lot of emails, and the wheels were just spinning, but I really wasn't going anywhere. And unfortunately, I got laid off during the global pandemic. I worked for the city of Edmonton as a mental health worker, and it was what I thought was my dream job. But I was only there for 3 months before I got laid off, because the city laid off 3,600 people, and I was one of them. And it was a really great way for me to reset and repivot and refocus and find out what's important to me. And it wasn't until then that I realized just how important art is. And so now we have what's with all these like Indigenous influencers and these TikTokers and these like overnight celebrities is kind of what it feels like. They're just popping up left and right, which is awesome. It's great. But if you think about it, when in history have we ever had what we have now, where we are seeing Indigenous content creators and seeing everyday life and seeing art and seeing song and dance and fashion and design? When are we seeing that to this extent in social media? Because I grew up I'm older, but I grew up watching a lot of TikTokers. Sorry, not TikTokers, YouTubers. I grew up watching a lot of YouTubers like Shane Dawson and Glozell and Niga Higa and Michelle Fan and like all of these old school, super old school YouTubers. But I grew up not seeing any representation for res kids, for us, for our art. There wasn't really any of that. And I know you've all heard it before, representation matters. It's a buzzword, but it isn't. it's not just about who's on the screen, it's about who's holding the camera, who's in the writing room, who's getting the funding, who's in the group chat when all of the creative direction is being decided. That's where the representation truly, truly comes into play. And as Indigenous creators, I feel like we've been boxed into stereotypes forever. You know, we're these warriors, we're the wisdom keepers, victims, even sometimes. And don't get me wrong, some of our aunties are definitely wise and very scary, but that's not all we are. You know, we're chaotic, we're hilarious, we're artistic, we're poetic, we're resilient, we're messy, we're brilliant, we're bold. We can be all of those things. We just need a little bit of control and direction. And I don't just want to be a token Indigenous person on any kind of panel or any kind of project, but that's kind of what it feels like sometimes. I really would love for us to have the reins over our own narratives and our own artistic sovereignty. Um, coming into this industry, I started by downloading TikTok, as I'm sure most people have done that. But during the pandemic, TikTok was really popping off and everyone was in lockdown. So we didn't really get to do a lot of things. But my niece was like, "Uncle, you gotta get TikTok." And my understanding of what TikTok at the time was that it was just this app where like 12-year-olds just did these dances on the internet, which was to me not something that I was interested in. I said, "No, I'm not downloading it. I'm not downloading it." Finally, I caved and I was like, "You know what? Let's download it." So I did, and I was really shocked, I think, at the amount of not 12-year-olds dancing on the internet it was, because I got to see a lot of comedy and I got to see a lot of dancing. I think at the time there was this trend of people getting into their regalia and doing like little flips and tossing their moccasins and stuff. And to me, it was so fascinating. It was beautiful because this was a time where, you know, pretty little white girls were running the internet and doing makeup tutorials and all these things. And it was kind of the only representation that was out there for social media at the time. But now we had this influx of people, you know, even familiar faces that I knew who were proud of their heritage and proud of their culture and proud of their traditions. And they were also getting a ton of recognition and praise for it, which at the time, I just really don't think that that was happening. One thing that I recognized though pretty immediately is when I got onto, you know, the native TikTok, I recognized that there wasn't a lot of people like me. And when I say people like me, I mean like there wasn't a lot of people who were visibly queer or who were two spirit or who appreciated some of the things that I appreciated, like blending indigeneity with makeup and speaking for those sort of misrepresented people. Um, and then I realized, you know what? What if I become somebody who creates the art rather than just somebody that sits there and watches and consumes the art? So I started to create some videos. Nobody was watching my videos, you guys. I was getting like 13 views and I was freaking out because I was like, oh my God, I'm so popular. Holy crap, 13 people watched it. Even though it was probably me on like 5 different devices watching my own videos. So I knew I made up a big chunk of that number. But there was one video actually, probably I want to say 3 months into me making videos where nobody was watching them. I made one video and it was just a story time, really simple, me standing in front of the camera, just holding my hand up, telling this really crazy story about when I was 18 and I used to party. And I told that story, and I remember it only took me maybe 2 minutes to make that video, and I took a nap. I turned my phone off, took a nap. I only slept for maybe an hour and I woke up and I looked and that video had 680,000 views and I freaked out. That day I got 12,000 followers in one day and I was literally shaking. I was freaking out. I'm like, "Oh my God, what do I do now?" I'm like, "Do I pack it all up and go to Hollywood? Like, is this it for me? Like, people want more from me now. Like, oh my God, what do I do?" You know? Lots of like pressure because this is, like I said, something that really hadn't been happening to people that I knew at least. And immediately I felt this pressure to create two spirit representation. So the next video I made was a video of me doing my makeup and talking about the history that I was taught about two spirit identity. And that video also did very, very well. And I recognized that there was sort of a need, um, sort of a gap in this space for representation that felt authentic to me. And it was really heartwarming, you guys. It really, I'm sure a lot of you know Two Spirit people in the community. And if you don't, I would be surprised if you didn't. But as Two Spirit people, whether you live on reserve or you live in the city or whatever, there isn't a lot of space that's created for people like me. And so for me to see myself being embraced as somebody who wears makeup or, somebody who talks about being Two Spirit, it was really heartwarming and eye-opening to see myself being embraced in an online space because online spaces aren't safe. They're really not safe, especially for minorities or BIPOC people. So that was a kind of a big turning point, and that's what sort of drove me into this life and made me realize that maybe I could create a career out of creating content, but I didn't know how, and nobody was teaching me. And so it was sort of just like throwing paint at a wall and seeing what stuck, seeing what worked. What I did understand though is when it comes to creating content and comes to creating art in this medium, this short form sort of medium, new media is what I call it. Consistency is key. And so what I was doing was I was creating between 1 to 7 videos every single day for probably 2 years before I started to kind of make any money. And I always tell people when you want to start out being a content creator, you have to be okay with people not like vibing with your stuff. You have to be okay with the 13 views and you have to celebrate those 13 views. I was creating videos full time while working. I was working as a social worker in Toronto and I was working for Two Spirited People of the First Nations. I was a youth resource developer there. And I would do 7 hours of programming with youth during the day for my job. And then I would turn off my computer and I would turn on my ring light and I would start filming. And I would film videos for 3 hours and I would edit and then I would post and I would sleep and I'd do it all again the next day. And I did that consistently for about 2 years before I got my first email, which was like, "Hey Kai, we're wondering if you can come in and speak on this panel about creating content. We're gonna pay you $4,000." And I was like, "Oh my God, $4,000." I was like, "That's how much I make all month working full time. Like, that's crazy." I said, "Okay, let me ask my boss." So I asked my boss. My boss was really cool about it, was like, "Yeah, go for it." So I did that. And then all of a sudden I got two more emails. And then it was three emails. And then at one point it was like 7 emails a week. And it was like all of these requests of like, we want you to come and make a video for this. We want you to film this. We want you to be this. And it got to the point where I was so overwhelmed because I was doing it all on my own. And I didn't understand the importance of reaching out for support, reaching out for help. Um, there are so many barriers that we face as Indigenous people, but especially as artists. I think we we sometimes have both historical trauma, but we're because we're living in a colonial society, a colonial structure. A lot of these issues that we face are issues that other people aren't necessarily facing all of the time. For example, lack of funding, tokenization, lack of equipment or mentorship. I go into probably 70 communities a year and I meet with young people, Indigenous youth, and they want to be streamers, they want to be makeup artists, they want to do tutorials, they want to be comedians, they want to be all of these things. And I want that for them, but they don't have internet in the res, or they do have internet, it's Skynet, but it's really slow and they can't even open up a PDF, or they can't upload a video, or they say, Kai, I want to be like you, I want to make videos. And I'm like, awesome, what do you need? Oh, well, I don't have a phone, I don't have a tablet, I don't have a computer, I don't have this. And that's really sad. It's a shame. I think that a lot more reserves and communities are starting to, I think, understand the importance of being able to connect on the internet. It shouldn't be a privilege, but unfortunately it is. And they're being cut off from the world. And one thing that I've noticed, because I founded an Indigenous gaming organization called Nichi Clan 2 years ago, there's 700 members in our Discord right now that talk and hang out and play games together. But what I've recognized is for a lot of these young people, using the internet, especially social media and gaming, is sometimes the only form of socialization that they have. It's the only place where they get to meet peers, where they get to share interests and share laughs. And especially in northern communities or fly-in communities that are isolated, there's I mean, I don't need to tell you all of this, but there's such uh, a crisis, I would say, happening with mental health for our young people, wherein we're having a lot of people taking their own lives and even having what's called cluster suicides, where one will happen and then it'll kind of ricochet and there'll be a bunch more happening. And these are so heartbreaking and devastating to learn about. But one piece of information that I got was that a lot of them turn to Snapchat and turn to Instagram to be able to connect with their friends. They're not even texting anymore. It's all Snapchat and things like that. And so finding ways to overcome some of these barriers that we face, and especially lack of advocacy coming into these communities, teaching some of the older people and some of the people who make decisions, teaching them about some of these barriers and teaching them about the importance of connectivity for our young people, I think is, I don't even know if it's a stretch to say that it's life saving or it's life promotion. We're promoting connectivity and we're promoting social circles that can exist both in person, but also they just happen online. That's just where young people are. And so if we want to be able to connect with young people, we need to understand that and we need to just take that as a fact. Another sort of barrier that I've noticed is being shadow banned for speaking up about certain things on the internet. I think that people don't necessarily understand how algorithms work sometimes. Things get pushed onto your feed, and sometimes they're things you're interested in, and sometimes not. But I think that a lot of people don't understand that when you are hyper political, or maybe not even hyper political, but you're just speaking about social issues or you're speaking about political climates or policies or anything like that, there are systems in place that sort of push that content down and it isn't reached by a lot of people. And as I'll speak for myself because I can't speak for anybody else, but as somebody like myself who is both queer and indigenous, I don't really get the privilege of not being political because people will ask me like, "Wow, why are you always speaking about, rights and policies and, these things, social issues?" I don't have the privilege to ignore them because every single day that I am existing is political, unfortunately, because so many of these government systems and so many of these news outlets have made it made it political. Like, so you don't really get an opportunity to not be. But when you do speak up about those kinds of truths on social media, sometimes it can lead to your account being suppressed, or you'll notice that, where you usually get 70,000 views, now you're only getting 17. And you're like, whoa, what's going on? You could have, I know people with 7 million followers. I go to their profile, they're getting 6,000 views on a video, wherein somebody will have 10 followers and they'll get 20,000. So really, you have to be kind of cognizant of those kinds of things. Um, Also, another thing, speaking specifically for myself as a creator in the space, I I tend to use humor a lot as a vehicle for explaining hard truths and telling stories and telling things about myself, um, and having to constantly explain to people why my humor is dark or it's rank or whatever, um, and trying to explain it in a way that makes sense to them sometimes feels like just a cultural difference. It feels like having to overcome cultural uh, competencies, really. Um, oh, somebody asked about brand deals. That's a really good example of one of them. I got reached out to by Kraft Dinner, which dream collab. But Kraft Dinner reached out to me and they were like, "Hey, we want you to do this video." And it was a video about, those little KD cups that you microwave? They're amazing, you guys. And I know I'm paid to say that, but I eat those unironically. They're so good. Anyway, they're ready in 3 minutes. And so the brand reached out to me and they were like, "Hey, we want you to make this video and we want it to be 3 minutes long, but you have to do an activity. You have to do an activity for 3 minutes and then prove that, like, oh, that's how long it took. And then you have to eat the craft dinner or whatever." And I wrote them this really awesome script. It was humorous. It was my voice. It was like totally on brand for me. I talked about how craft dinner has sustained our people for 7 generations, and I made this really funny script about craft dinner being like a ceremonial food, and how my cookum used to eat craft dinner, and like it was funny. It was funny for the people who got it, but craft themselves hated the idea. They were like, "Kai, this is so inappropriate. We can't say that. This like we're liable if people sue us and say that our food is sustaining an entire race of people." They were like, this is ridiculous. And so they made me cut it. They sent it back to me, my script, and it was just redlined. The whole thing was just redlined, and I was like, oh god. So the script I ended up doing was basically one they wrote for me, which sucks. And that's a great example of like, as Indigenous people, we try to bring our own flair and our own style to things, but it just doesn't translate well, and people just don't understand it. It's not for them. Uh, but they still want Indigenous people to be involved. They just don't want Indigenous people to be Indigenous when they're involved. Like they want the res, but they don't want it to be resi, which is what I found out a lot. I partnered with Maybelline probably 2 years ago, and Maybelline came out with this big campaign that was like, "Be your true self, paint the way that you want to paint your face and whatever." And I was kind of known for doing like graphic eyeliner looks and stuff like that. So they sent me a bunch of makeup and were like, "Can you please create a video talking about your identity in a beautiful way?" And I was like, "Sure." So I wrote them this really poetic, like, oh, it was like some of my best work, if I have to say so myself. And I sent it back to them, and I was excited to hear their thoughts. And I remember they were like, "Hey, yeah, so this is great, but we're gonna cut out all the stuff about growing up on the res and water, and we're gonna cut this, and can you maybe not explain it like this?" And same thing, they just redlined the whole thing. I thought it was beautiful. They thought that it was confusing and it was a little bit too I don't even know, too much, I guess. Um, and I ended up filming the video and sending it to them. However, that campaign came out and my video was not a part of it. They had 6 people a part of that campaign. I was 7, and they didn't release my video. They paid me. I got the check cleared, but they promised me that I would be on their main page. And Maybelline has like 8 million followers on Instagram. So I was like, cool, this is a big deal. Like, I'm going to be in this campaign showing that like Indigenous Two Spirit beauty is like beautiful. And yeah, my video never came out, and they ghosted us. They stopped responding to our emails after they had paid me. And I just remember feeling like this is the reality of like being Indigenous in these spaces. You sometimes, even when you're invited in, you're not actually invited in. You actually don't get a seat at the table. Um, and so it's kind of like brown tokenization is what I like to call it. It's like people will check off their, I don't even know if it's like affirmative action or like what it is, but they have to meet this quota of like, oh, we got to get some brown people in here. And then the minute that they get you, it's like, cool. Well, we don't actually want this. So like, we'll give them their money and then we'll kind of do our own thing. And that's how they silence you. Um, so what does it actually mean to make space? Well, people like to say all the time, like, oh, we really want to amplify Indigenous voices. But what they sometimes do is they speak over us, or they shout too loudly that our voice gets drowned out. There was one time where I did what was it? Oh, it was I met with a really big company in Vancouver, and they wanted me to speak at their I th- I don't think it was EA Sports, but it was a big company, like multi-billion-dollar company. And they asked me to come in and speak about. They wanted me to speak about Two-Spirit identity, but they also wanted me to speak about being a first-generation survivor of the Indian residential schools. Um, and because my mom was in the residential school for 7 years in Musquechies, and so I go in there, and they're like, "Okay, introducing Kairyn Potts. He's our guest speaker. He's going to be talking about Two-Spirit identity and da 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 da. But before he does that, we're gonna do an intro and a bio and da da da. Tell me why this organization talked for like 40 minutes, and they had slides where there was pictures of me that I didn't consent to, and they did a presentation on Two-Spirit identity that was pulled right from Wikipedia, and they gave a whole keynote about Two-Spirit identity before they allowed me to speak. And it was so frustrating. I almost left the call like mid presentation because they didn't tell me that they were going to do that. And if you're going to invite an Indigenous person to come in and speak about their personal experience and their life, then you need to let them speak. You need to give them the microphone. You need to say, here's Kairyn, and you need to let us tell our own stories. So to have them give this big presentation about things that they had read on, Canadian Encyclopedia and like all of these things was so disheartening because it felt like they had given me the wheel, but then pushed me out of the driver's seat and just took control. And I didn't like that at all because there was not one Indigenous person in that room. So making space isn't just about giving people a seat at the table. It's also making sure that the menu doesn't give us food poisoning. That's really important. But what people can do to combat that, I think, is to hire Indigenous creators without asking them to code switch so much, and without asking them to water down who we are and our culture, as well as collaborating with us rather than just using us as consultants. There was I don't know if you guys ever played The Sims, but it's a really popular game, and I was reached out to by EA Sports because they were creating an expansion pack for The Sims that was completely Western themed with lots of like cowboys and stuff, but unfortunately, um, tons of like Indigenous people as well who were like Indians. And they brought us in and said, "Hey, we recognize that you guys are gamers and you're content creators. We want to consult with you about this game that we've created." When we went into the meeting, they told us that the game was already greenlit and was about to be released in 2 weeks, and that there was no room to change anything. And they brought us into a meeting and showed us 56 slides of this game. There was so many things wrong. I think we counted like 16 different things that were so inappropriate. They were stealing artwork from Indigenous creators. They were they were mixing up different patterns that belonged to different tribes and different nations. They had sweetgrass and sage that were like decorative pieces that you hang on the wall. Everything was just so inappropriate. But at that point, it was too late. They didn't consult with us while the game was being made. They waited until the game was already done and being released to be like, hey, hope you guys like this. And not one Indigenous person was a part of that process. And it was so baffling to me, just shocking. But that's, like I said, that's just another thing. That's another reason why we need to be creating spaces for Indigenous people by Indigenous people. I'm really shocked that collaboration with Indigenous people is not just the default common practice when you're creating anything to do with their culture. Um, it sounds about white though, honestly. Like every time we go into these spaces, it's always non-Indigenous people who never have that thought in their mind. They have the privilege of just not thinking about respecting cultures or respecting heritage or practices. Um, so let's talk about some examples of when it actually does work. Um, One really great example of that is I partnered with TELUS, which they have some issues themselves. However, they invited me in to do a collaboration piece with them that was called the Witness Blanket. And it was a project that was a digital art installation. So you go on a website and you look at this art piece, and it's massive, but it's interactive. So you get to click on every little piece of art, and it comes with it a big story narrated by whoever created that art piece. And every single art piece represented something about an Indigenous residential school survivor's story and talked specifically about their own story in their own words. And everybody who was a part of that project was compensated and offered protocol, which I thought was really next level because most, I would say 98% of these companies don't offer me protocol when they ask me for literally like tobacco questions, you know? But they did that with these residential school survivors and paid Indigenous influencers to highlight and promote this really incredible art installation that told accurate stories about the residential school from survivors and their families. And it was a really great way to introduce the history, the true history, to students because they had different tiers of like explaining it. They had one for like elementary and then one for junior high and one for high school. And I thought that that was incredible because we aren't teaching those things in schools. And when we are, we're not teaching them accurately. So that was a really great example of TELUS actually being able to recognize that if they're going to profit, um, or maybe not even profit, but if they're going to use Indigenous people and their stories for some type of social clout or just to showboat or to lie about how progressive they are, um, that's inappropriate. But it was really awesome to see that they involved Indigenous people throughout every single part of the process, right to the point where it was released, and they were hiring Indigenous influencers to promote this art installation that was completely free for everybody to learn from. And they even flew us out to Vancouver to do the in-person unveiling of the art installation, and it was just a really good it was a really good project, and I really felt proud to be a part of that. It was one of the first times where I felt like, maybe this isn't all bad. Maybe it's not all just like, because we sometimes get a bad rap as Indigenous creators, content creators. A lot of people call us influencers and things like that. And sure, like I don't personally take that identity on, but I can understand that people, that's what they call us. And so sure, but it felt cool for once to be like, hey, I was a part of something that probably made a difference. And it probably educated a lot of people. And I know that my mom would be proud of me as a residential school survivor, that there were stories that were being told. And I was using my platform to educate a bunch of non-Indigenous people about these realities. That's really what it's about. And then another example of like creating our own spaces is about 4 months ago, 3.5 months ago, I created a podcast, and it's called the Real Rank Podcast. And I created it with a good friend of mine. And we had listened to so many podcasts out there that were Indigenous. But unfortunately, none of them gave me what I was so hungry for when I listened to podcasts, because I love comedy, and I love uh I love wit, and I love crude, sort of rugged humor. It's just so funny to me. And we weren't really finding any of those when I was searching. And I listened to probably 13 different podcasts that were Indigenous. And one of the main themes of these podcasts was trauma and mental health and resiliency, which are very, very important things, obviously. But that was kind of all that was out there. And I'm like, well, where's all the funny podcasts? Like I would listen to somebody telling like ghost stories in a podcast. I think that would be really funny, and somebody should do it, but nobody's really doing it. And so I remember my friend and I, Scott, we were sitting on the couch, and I looked over at him, and I'm like, we should make a podcast. And he was like, yeah, word, I'm down. And I'm like, for real? He's like, yeah. I'm like, all right. So we went on Amazon, purchased like $1,500 worth of shit, and it came the next day, and we set it up in my home office and got a little couch, and like that was that. We just hit record, and we just started blabbing. We didn't script anything, nothing. And our first episode was like an hour and a half long, and I was like, oh no, people are gonna be so upset at us. We're so annoying. Like we talk so much. People want to listen to like half an hour podcasts, not an hour and a half. Um, but to my surprise and to my delight, people actually really responded well to it, and I think that it was just exemplified what is missing when we create spaces. People are so hungry to see themselves represented and to see their own humor on a bigger platform. I know that that's what I was looking for, and so we created it ourselves, and it's really about not waiting for somebody else to do it. It's about having the audacity and the confidence to go out and just create it yourself. And you don't have to wait for grants. You don't have to wait for big, big, big things to be this perfect moment. At one point, I felt like Scott and I should have waited until we were able to afford a big podcasting studio where we could do all of these things. But the beauty of this project was that we just did it ourselves and didn't wait for anybody. And we just used whatever just tools we had at our own disposal. We filmed with our iPhones, and I watched tutorials on YouTube about how to splice the audio and how to clean it up. And I sat there for 4 hours editing our very first episode because I didn't know what I was doing. And it came out really, really good. And so that's why I always tell young people, like, don't freaking wait for people to give you something on a platter for everything to be perfect. Things are never going to be perfect, and life is happening while you're waiting. So just start now, start tomorrow, have the audacity to think that whatever you do, whatever you put your mind to, it will be successful, and have fun doing it. We have so much fun filming our podcast that it doesn't feel like work, even though it is, and it is a lot of work. But that's where all that passion comes from. And when we create spaces as Indigenous creators, we can never lose sight of Indigenous joy. If reconciliation, I don't even like that word, I call it the R word. If reconciliation is actually truly possible, it is going to come on a vehicle of Indigenous joy. Our people being happy, telling our own stories, laughing together. Um, I really want to leave all of you folks here not only just feeling inspired, but really feeling activated, because it's not enough to just include Indigenous creators. We deserve investment in ourselves. We deserve platforms. We deserve big voices, megaphones. We deserve the same messy grace that every single other non-Indigenous creator gets. We get to get canceled. We get to flop. We get to experiment. We get to fail. We get to succeed. We get to grow, and we should be allowed to do that. I think that there is such a pressure put on Indigenous creators to be the end all be all of speaking about every single issue. I get people DMing me, how come you didn't talk about this one person who went missing in Manitoba 6 years ago? And I'm like, well, I didn't know about it. And also, like, it's confusing that it's like you have to do this, like we're expected to sort of speak about every single thing, and while we all kind of talk about whatever is passionate for us, we also deserve to just be, and just to exist. And just because you are an Indigenous person who went viral online overnight doesn't mean that you're suddenly going to be super educated about everything to do in the world. And all of a sudden, you're going to be this like professor of everything, and you get paid to come in and give massive keynotes about things you really don't know all that much about, only because you have a platform. Um, I think that that's sort of reckless, and we have a responsibility to our communities to make sure that the people that we're giving platforms to have the education and have the ability to be able to lead in those spaces in a really safe and responsible way. Um, that's, I feel like, a whole nother conversation. But the point that I'm trying to make is that you all matter. Fellow Indigenous creators, keep going. Your voice is so, so, so important. Even all of the posts that fail are important. Every single awkward YouTube video and TikTok, it all matters. It's all a part of something bigger. We're reclaiming our stories. Um, and to people who are non-Indigenous, they need to just admire us, support us from afar. When a flower blooms, we don't get to tell the flower how to be beautiful. We just stand back and let it blossom into whatever it's going to be. That's the same thing that should be happening with Indigenous artists. Let us create our art in whatever way that we want that makes us feel good. And pay us, fucking pay us. Hire us, make sure that we're a part of the team, make sure that our voices are heard, collaborate us, create space with and for us, because we are not here just to take up space, we're here to recreate those spaces. Yeah. Um, Kinanas kumtanan. Ishnish. Hi, hi. Thank you all so much for listening to me ramble about creating spaces and being an artist in this space. It's kind of a whirlwind. It's a roller coaster, but it's so worth it. And I hope that there are 1 million more Indigenous creators that come out of the gate swinging and just really showing up and showing out for our people and showing how beautiful we are. I have about, I want to say 7 to 10 minutes that I can answer questions. If anybody has any questions, I saw a couple in the chat. I wasn't able to get to them because I was just trying to focus. But yeah, if anybody has any questions or wants to type it out, or you can just unmute probably and just shout it at me. I'll try to be as open of a book as I can.
I have a question. I wanted to start by just saying thank you so much, Chima Gwetch. Like, I just love sitting in these talks and just hearing all the words that you want to share and spending that time with us. It's awesome. So, I guess for me, um, I don't know if this is something you struggled with when you first started out, but like, how do you handle imposter syndrome when it comes to being like an Indigenous influencer? Because I find in these spaces, there's so many. I don't want to say parameters, but so many like expectations placed on you on like if you have a voice and when you can speak and when you can't speak. And I guess for me, like both my parents are Indigenous. Like I'm registered under my dad's reserve, which is Swan Lake First Nation, but I did grow up off reserve. So I guess for me, like struggling with feeling like, oh, like I have that voice and we grew up like going to powwows and learning about our culture and we like know our community and where we're from, but feeling like, oh, I can't speak because I grew up off reserve. And that's kind of like a narrative that's been like placed onto me, which I know is not true, but like just wondering how you navigate like these expectations that are placed on you or imposter syndrome and working through it.
Yeah, that's a great question. It kind of doesn't ever really go away. You just kind of get better at navigating it and managing it. One kind of trick, I don't know if it's a trick, but like one thing that I do to cope with that is it's kind of crazy. I I like fill myself with so much blind confidence, like overconfidence almost, to the point where it's almost ridiculous. Like I go into spaces knowing I'm the least important person there, but acting like I'm the most important person and that my voice is so, so important. And I tell myself that and I feel that and I hype myself up and I go into those spaces and I hold my head high and like when people talk to me, I speak confidently and I don't let my voice shake and I like try my hardest to put on this mask because I feel like sometimes our bodies don't know when we're lying. And so if we just act mega, mega, mega confident and we go out into the world, we kind of are just being confident then. Even like no one else is going to know that it's fake. So it allows other people to see that confidence in us. And when they come and talk to us, they think that our voice matters way more than it does because we're giving off that vibe. And that's how you create that space. It's like kind of like manifesting, but not really. It's like I always tell people doing is the opposite of hoping. And so that's what I do. I'm like, if I want people to respect me or if I want people to think that my voice is important or that I deserve to be in this space, then I need to act like it. I can't go in there like mousy and scared. And I just need to have insane confidence for like half an hour and just get through that situation and that space will now be better for the next indigenous person to come in and take up that space because I have gone in and I have made such an impression that we are important and we do matter and that our voices are important. So yeah, sometimes you got to fake it until you make it, man. Like for real. I did that for 3 years and that's how I was able to start public speaking without being nervous. I can speak in front of thousands of people now and I'm not nervous, but it's because I was like so delusional when I was first starting out that I convinced myself that I can do anything. And now I kind of it's sort of freeing to just not care about other people's opinions of you or like at the end of the day you're you and that's not going to change whether you grew up on reserve off reserve whatever background you have you're still indigenous you still matter your voice is still important. Nobody is expecting you to speak about things that you have no experience with. If you do not have experience growing up on the res, then you kind of have no business talking about growing up on the res. Like it's not your story to tell. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. You can still be indigenous and be urban indigenous and like be a concrete Indian as they call it or whatever. You can do all of that and still hold your head high. Your indigeneity is not yeah, sort of measured by where you grew up. Like you still get to be proud in who you are. And everybody, I don't know why, there's this trend of like people of indigenous people on the internet who try to give off the vibe that they're way more connected to culture and ceremony and all these things than they actually are when there's really no shame in saying, hey, I didn't grow up in the culture. Hey, I don't speak my language. Hey, I don't know who my family is. Hey, I was adopted. Hey, I'm a foster child. All of these things, like that's your story. You should own it and be proud of it. And we should be creating spaces for reconnecting Indigenous people to safely explore and like keyword safely explore their identities and tell their own stories, because those stories are super important too, because Indigenous people are grossly overrepresented in the foster care system and child and family services. In Saskatchewan, 80% of all kids in care are Indigenous. Those kids aren't going to grow up with their culture, but they still deserve to be Indigenous and tell their own stories, and we need to support those young people. Sorry, I know that was a really long answer.
No, I loved it. Thank you so much, Chimagach. Really appreciate it.
Okay, we have one in the chat. What are your views about non-Indigenous companies that want Indigenous employees to teach truth and reconciliation if that's not their skill set or concept they're ready to discuss? I think that's disgusting, and it should not be happening, and it happens all too often. When I worked at for the city of Edmonton, they asked me on my third day on the job to rewrite their land acknowledgement. I said, no, 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 that's not in my job description. I'm here as a mental health officer. I'm not here to write truth and reconciliation garbage. It's not for us. It's your responsibility. You need to be doing it. So that's what I think about that. Sidebar, who's going to win the Stanley Cup? You guys, I know nothing about sports. Believe it or not, I know I look like just a huge sports lover. I know when you look at me, you're like, he probably watches football. But no, I don't. I'm so sorry. You both looked you both jigging at the Indigenous Fashion Week in Edmonton was the best in those platform shoes too. I'm surprised I didn't snap my ankle in half, you guys. I think it just goes to show it's called gay audacity is what I like to call it. Like as soon as I put on a pair of heels, I'm like so suddenly I can sprint in them. I'm like just amazing at doing it. I don't know why. Who are you wearing today? Oh, those are yours. Yeah, the way that Scott and I, when we are like, hey, what are you wearing today? We're always wearing each other's clothes. I'm like, hey, that's where that went. You klepto. um, okay. There was another question. Do you use specific apps or websites for editing videos? You guys, you have to download CapCut and get CapCut Pro. That's what I use, and it does everything. It even does a teleprompter. You know how influencers have to like cut up every like 3 minutes because they can only or remember so many like of their script. Teleprompter, man, just read off the teleprompter. It's so good, and the editing in CapCut is so user friendly. It's one of the most user friendly apps that I've ever used. If you're a beginner, it's really easy to get into it, and most of the big influencers use CapCut. So you can also use CapCut on your desktop as well, which is pretty neat. And it's free. Like you can do everything you want with the app for free. However, getting the pro version is just so good because of all of the unique features that it gives you. Like it can even like reduce the noise on your voice. It can like auto cut things. Like AI is crazy, you guys. Whether you support it or not, it's just crazy in this industry. And I think if you are an Indigenous creator and you're not utilizing some of these tools, um, you just have to be like you're missing out a little bit. Yeah, so that was all. Do we have any more questions? Sorry, I'm just like freaking out here.
You do a great job moderating the chat, Kairyn. I was trying to help you.
I'm so used to doing it. I'm just like, let me just do it myself.
But yeah, is there any more questions for Kairyn before he takes off?
Also, side note, I partied with Paris Hilton and Queen Latifah a few days ago, which was so random. And I was walking and somebody bumped into my back and I turned around and it was effing Queen Latifah, you guys. And I pulled my sunglasses down and I was like, is that the Queen? And she goes, hi, baby. And I was like, oh my God, Queen Latifah, I loved you so much in Bringing Down the House when you beat up that white girl. I don't know why I said that. You know, when you get nervous when you meet like famous people, I just started talking out of my ass and I said that to her and she goes, oh, well, she was a really nice white girl. And I was like, yeah, no, of course. Like, yeah. Like I meant like the character, not that person. Like, and then her bodyguard grabbed me by the like lower part of my back and pushed me, like shoved me to keep walking. And I just got out of there. It was so embarrassing. I got to hug Troye Sivan. Sitting next to us was Anya Taylor-Joy, who was in Queen's Gambit. She was like literally bumping into me. I think my friend was like smoking a joint and she really wanted some. Um, who else? Kylie Jenner was like literally a foot away from us the whole time with Timothy Chalamet. Flavor Flav was behind us, which was so random. I'm like, turn around, he's wearing this. He literally wears a big ass clock on his neck, you guys. Like, it's not just for show. Like that's who he is. He's been doing it for like 40 years. Um, who else? Paris Hilton. She came and talked with us. Kate Hudson. Emma Roberts tapped on my back and went, "I'm really sorry. My bag keeps hitting you in the bum. I'm so sorry. I'm disrupting you." And I'm like, "No, no, no. You're good." She goes, "Yeah, thank you so much. I'm Emma, by the way." And I'm like, "Yeah, you're Emma. Like, hello?" She goes, "Oh, you're sweet. What's your name?" I'm like, "Kai." She's like, "Well, I hope you have an amazing night, Kai. And I'm so sorry for bugging you." I'm like, "You're effing Emma Roberts. Like, come on." Like, there was just so many. Oh, Tate McRae. We got to see Tate McRae. Uh, Bretman Rock. Oh, there was just so many people. Everywhere you looked, there was somebody that you saw on TV or like in a movie or whatever. It was insane. Justin Bieber was there with Haley Bieber. Yeah, it just everyone all over the place. It was kind of insane. Did you see Post Malone? I did see Post Malone. Yep, and we got to see Megan Thee Stallion, and she brought out Sierra to do goodies, which was pretty insane. And I loved that. Billie Eilish came out during Charlie XCX, which was really cool. Yeah, I got to see Green Day. We did. I skipped out on Travis Scott, which I think a lot of other people did. I know this is crazy, you guys. I left the artist pit during Travis Scott because I was just bored. I don't know any of his music. I couldn't understand anything he was saying. He was just shouting, it felt like, and everybody was tunneling out of the audience. Like it was not a good performance. Sorry to whoever loves him. I'm sure he's done. Didn't he kill a bunch of people? I think he killed a bunch of people at Astroworld, and he had to like pay for like 9 people's funerals because they got like trampled, and he like wasn't stopping the show while people were like dying in the audience. Insane. Holy real deadly tangent. Okay, you guys, we should end it there. I apologize. Otherwise, we're just gonna sit here all night and just talk.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you again, Kairyn, for sharing your experiences and insights with us today. It's amazing to hear your story and your experience to work up to where you are in life. Thank you again for joining us. Um, I also want to extend my gratitude to the Starbucks Foundation again for making the Youth Connect possible. Their support creates spaces for important conversations like this. Before we go, just a quick reminder, please complete the evaluation survey that will be sent out after the session. And yeah, thank you all for being here today. Stay safe, stay inspired, and we'll see you next time. Thank you again, Kairyn.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.